To Her It's All a Game by J. Wilburn. Wade Sedley rocked from one foot to the other in his family's kitchen. He was running low on excuses for why he didn't want to leave the house. It was his older sister, 7 years his elder and driving herself places, who ratted him out. She said it without looking up from her phone as she finished her breakfast. It's that Mackenzie girl he's afraid of. Both parents looked to Willa, who did not return their gaze, and then to Wade, who looked away at the linoleum floor. Mackenzie Marlandale? Mom asked. How can you possibly be afraid of her? He couldn't tell them. They wouldn't believe him anyway, and there was no telling what she might do if he did tell. She likes him, Willow said. All right, let me change the tense here. She likes him, Willa said. Shut up, Wade yelled. Hey, take it easy, Dad ordered. He had gotten bored and started checking email on his phone as well. She's a good girl from a good family. Just go on out and have fun today. All right, let's say Mom. We need to be specific here. Mom closed the matter. All right. Wade wasn't sure about Mackenzie's family, but he was sure about her, and that girl was anything but good. I don't want to. Let's say Mom thought she closed the matter. Mom thought she'd close the matter. All right. It's a lot of work for a dialogue tag, don't you think? I don't want to get out. Get out of the house and play, Dad ordered. Why doesn't Willa have to go play? I'm going to work. No more arguing. And that was the end of it. Wade hoped it wasn't the end of him. He slinked out through the side door and hoped... No, we already had hope, didn't we? And... endeavored... to keep... Alright, we'll see if that can do it. Let me spell endeavored correctly. And endeavored to keep the screen door's hinges from making too much noise. There we go. All right. The birds were super loud today. It was getting to be winter. They should have all been farther south, he thought. But what did he really know about birds? All right, let me put a question mark there. What does he really know about birds? Probably not much. He guessed they were robins, but none of them held still long enough for him to see. Excuse me. At least their noise covered that squeaky screen door. Wade decided to make his way through the yards to try to slip away from her attention. Let's just take away out of there. Then the birds went silent all at once. All that noise down to nothing in an instant. Sometimes at school, with all the noise in the cafeteria, let me put a comma there, kids would suddenly all pause at once. Then everyone got awkward and quiet. Usually people laughed and got back to talking again. He had never heard birds do that. Wade froze in place between yards. When none of the birds started laughing about the silence, he turned his head slowly. And there she was, 1 year older than him, but almost a head taller. Her hair was in large ponytails. A lot of the curly strands were escaping the ties, making her long, curly hair appear unruly. Her bright eyes fixed upon him, and he felt sick and weak down his center. Let me put another comma there. All right. She smiled with perfectly straight and white teeth gleaming. Got you. Wade abandoned his stealth plan and ran headlong into the street and down the center. He didn't have to look to know she was right behind him. He looked anyway. Her feet barely touched the ground as she glided along behind him in her terrible smooth motion. Upon meeting eyes with him again, she laughed high and shrill. He turned forward and put on speed. that he knew would do little good. He passed her house and the first intersection coming off Fitzwater Road. Both those turns were dead ends. Even if he couldn't outrun her, that was not the way to go. Wade allowed himself to believe that he might make the next turn ahead of her before he could cut the corner. All right, I need to change a misspelling there. Before he could cut the corner to run down Pearldale Avenue, she took him by the hair and lifted him up into the air. More of that giggling cut painfully into his ears as his feet lifted further and further from the ground. "Let me go, Mackenzie. Are you sure about that, stud?" Two cars passed each other on Pearldale several feet under him. He squirmed in her grasp with his scalp burning from supporting all his weight, but he said nothing. They reached the top of a grand old tree high above the backyard of one of the other houses. He had no idea which street it was on, as he had never traveled his neighborhood this high in the air. Mackenzie had lifted him onto rooftops before and sometimes left him there, but never this. They continued to rise. Maybe this time she intended to drop him from far over the town. "Stop, no higher, please, Mackenzie." She paused, and they floated up and down a moment before she rested her weight on one of the thick branches overlooking the yards. She still held him aloft by his hair. "You're killing me. It hurts so bad. Please stop." Wade grabbed her wrists with both hands, not to fight her, but to relieve a little of the pressure on his scalp. It didn't help much. "I'd never," she said. Mackenzie shook him. Let me add a word in there. Back and forth by his hair, adding to the pain as she winked. Then she pulled him in and gave him a light kiss on his sweaty forehead. "You're my favorite little buddy." Before he could respond, the branch under her snapped. They twisted down through the stems and leaves. The stems and leaves of the tree. She lost her grip on him, and he prepared to break every bone in his body. He heard the branch impact. He heard the falling. All right, got birds hanging around outside again. He heard the falling branch impact one of the yards with a bass thump. Then the wind knocked right out of him as he tumbled down the slope of a roof. Good grief. Lots of very specific misspellings here. Who wrote this thing? All right. The slope of a roof with the rough shingles tearing the skin on his elbows. In his daze, still trying to draw breath, Wade had a vague thought that he needed to stop rolling before he fell off this roof. But he made this effort too late and only succeeded in pulling the gutter away from the edge of the roof. The edge of the house, let's say. By a few inches before he fell again. Through the painful ends of the trimmed hedges, Wade cried out as he twisted through and finally rolled out onto the dead winter grass of a front yard. Let's say of someone's front yard. He was covered in scrapes and felt bruised to his core. As he wavered up to his feet again, he waited to see if anything on him came loose from that impossible fall. It was hard to tell with how much his scalp hurt, and what a relief it was to no longer be dangling from his hair like that. Mackenzie, somewhere on the other side of the house, let out a string of curse words that Wade barely knew and would never repeat. That got him in motion, and he ran down Pearldale to try to escape. For a long while, he thought she had given up on him for today. Falling from a treetop and off a roof at the same time hardly felt like getting away with anything, but as his lungs and legs burned from his sprint, let's say his desperate sprint, From his desperate sprint, he was thankful and wishful that it might just be over for now. He was just about to turn onto Yorktown Lane, which she landed. Let's say just as. All right, let's try that again. He was just about to turn onto Yorktown Lane just as she landed in a superhero pose in the middle of the intersection. There wasn't much traffic, but cars... I got a typo there. But cars honked and swerved around her, going all directions. She stood back up. She stood back up straight. With the child's imitation of a graceful dancer. She held out her arms beside her in a ta-da motion. Another car swerved and the driver yelled out his window as he kept going. Wade thought the cars would obliterate if they actually hit her. And no yelling yelling. Come on, buddy. Spell some words right, Jay Wilburn. I expect more out of you. All right. And no telling what might have happened if the driver had dared to stop to confront her. Unlike Wade, there wasn't a scratch on her. That was fun. Are you ready for more? He turned and ran in a limping, tired effort. She skated up beside him, and her shoes scraped along the concrete as she glided with him, matching his speed. Why can't you just leave me alone? Why? Because I don't want you hurting me anymore. So... Please, Mackenzie, she mocked. He stopped running, and her weight settled back on her feet again. You don't find this fun, Wade? You know I don't. He bent over and held his knees as his heart struggled to catch up. She ran her fingers through his hair and mussed it up gently in contrast to the pain she had caused flying up in the air with him by, let's say, in the air, holding him by his hair. You should appreciate me more. I'm a lot of fun. More than anyone you will ever know again. Do your parents know about your powers? After a pause, she placed her hand under his chin and brought him back and let's say gently. And gently brought him back to standing up and looking into her bright, cruel eyes. Did you tell on me? Who would I tell? Who would ever believe me? Her fingers tightened into a pinch of the skin under his jaw. Did you? No, I didn't. I was asking about your parents. Her grip eased a little, but only a little. They know what I want them to know. Like everyone else, they see what I want them to see. Wade cut his eyes at the street. Cars whizzed past. A couple, let's say a middle-aged couple, maybe married, walked wide around him and Mackenzie without looking up or breaking their conversation. Did none of them see? Could she hide her powers from all of them? That would explain a lot. What are you thinking about, buddy? Why you can't leave me alone? Because I want to play. She leaned in close to his face, and I like playing with you the most. He shoved her backward, and she sat down hard on the edge of the curb. Her teeth clacked together, and she gave a little grunt of surprise. Wade was surprised too, and he was terrified. Let me put a comma there. And he was terrified. As she put her hand down in the rubbish gathered in the street's gutter, let me make that possessive. The street's gutter, he broke into a run again, hoping against hope that he might escape. He made it a few blocks down Yorktown Lane and was considering which alley to cut through when she grabbed him by his, let's say nabbed. I just want to use a different word. When she nabbed him by his feet and pulled him into the air again. Let's say flipped. And flipped him as she ascended into the air again. This time he hit This time he hit... Oh, I'm leaving out a lot of words. Let's see if I can make this sentence into a sentence. I believe in myself here. This time he hit his head hard on the sidewalk before she hoisted him up and continued to rise. All the blood rushed to his head as, let's say, rushed to his brain as his arms dangled down past his ears. His shirt bunched up and obscured his vision, but not enough to hide that they were soaring up higher than they had been even at the top of that grand old tree. She was going to drop him for sure this time. As he felt his heart hammering inside his upside-down head, he watched blood drip from where he had struck the sidewalk. One drop landed in a woman's hairdo as she packed up her kids to leave St. Alistair Park far below. She paused to hold out one hand as if checking for rain. The wind started to get cold. It was warmer along the ground today, but the sky was owned by winter. "You're going to be sorry for what you did, Wade," she shouted over the wind. "I already am," he muttered, still dripping blood like a cloud. Still dripping blood like a storm cloud, let's say. Just 2 words. Alrighty. Whether she heard him or not, she let go. There was a moment where he felt all his weight shift with release, but thought he might be floating. That illusion vanished as he rushed toward the ground in a tight spiral. Earth and sky blurred into one another as he rushed to his death. All the wind knocked out of him again as she struck him from the side before he could reach the ground. For a moment she held him like a baby, but then let him go and he tumbled along the grass ahead of her. She landed on her hands and knees over where he stopped rolling. We'll make a new sentence here. Her hair that had now all come loose. Let me put 2 commas. Her hair that had now all come loose dangled in his face. He wanted to brush it away, but was afraid to move. Mackenzie giggled and kissed him on the end of his nose. After another pause, she licked his nose. He showed his teeth and groaned, but she stood up over him, laughing. "You are always such fun," Wade said. Her voice echoed, and he rolled slowly to his stomach. I'm going to use his name here. Wade could have sworn there had been many more people in this park a moment ago when he looked down from above, but all those folks appeared to have found somewhere else to go, leaving the 2 of them alone. She picked him up by his shirt and belt loop and hurled him through the air with another round of laughter. He braced himself for a hard landing and then slid over a sheet of ice. The temperature dropped quickly. And he raised his head to see he was on the far side of a frozen pond, with the park suddenly covered in snow. She walked out across the ice now, wearing red fur robes with the hood pulled up around her face. How was this possible? How was any of it possible? He remembered her saying her parents saw what she wanted them to see. Maybe this was like that. But how would he be sitting on top of a pond unless this was real? All right. I don't know. Let's find out. Wade. Forgot what my character's name was there for a second. The image wavered. Grass showed through the snow before the snow returned fully. Wade sat very still, let's say upon the ice instead of on it. Upon the ice. Then the ice cracked, and so did the insane smile across Mackenzie's lips. Her feet crashed through, and then she held onto the edge of the broken surface. She was thrashing. The snow really did waver in and out of existence then. Wade started to pull himself along the ice toward the closest bank, let's say behind him. And away from her. She screamed and cried as she tried to pull herself free and failed. He hated her for being afraid after all she'd put him through. Let me make that a contraction. Rolls off the tongue better. Alrighty. Please help me. Her voice sounded so weak and unlike herself. He climbed to the top of the bank and saw the snow melting away in a circle, vanishing toward the pond. Maybe this was the end of her powers. Wade, please help me. He grit his teeth and climbed back out onto the ice along his belly. She reached for him with eyes wide, and he took her frigid hands. Pulling as best he could, he got her out of the water and coaxed her along on their stomachs toward shore. The ice started cracking around them. Larger chunks tipped upward and sank below the exposed water. Wade kept going and then led her up the short... Wade kept going, let's say, and they made it. He then led... Okay, I need to spell that correctly. All right. He then led her up the short slope away from the pond as the snow and ice vanished entirely. Her clothes returned to normal, and the temperature rose until he started sweating again. She hugged him tight and then let him go. With eyes cast down, she waved a hand, and all his aches and pains disappeared. He looked and saw his scrapes had gone as well. He touched his scalp carefully. It was a bit tender, but didn't hurt. Didn't really hurt anymore. And there was no blood. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." He turned his back and moved in the direction of home. Before he took very many steps, larger trees filled his view and blocked out any sign of the park or the street beyond. The air grew humid as vines twisted around the thick trunks. Undergrowth sprouted around their legs, and the sounds of jungle animals filled the air. Over an endless tone of singing insects. There we go. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered. "Because we're friends now, and we're not done playing. I want to go home, Mackenzie, please." "Please," she teased. "You can go home when we are done playing." The ground thundered and shook as something very large charged toward them through the trees. The leaves that made up the high canopy wavered back and forth with the motion of the approaching monster. Okay. She giggled and spoke close to his ear. "If I were you, I'd start running." He did so, pushing branches and vines out of his way as he fled through this new jungle. Wade vowed to himself that if she ever found herself in trouble again, he wouldn't make the mistake of saving her.